All right, folks, it's 12:30. Ready or not, here we come. This is Bill Murphy with ASP Quick Supply and Bowman Construction Supply Company. And I'm representing all three companies, and we're excited. We're going to share some good news and exciting news with you guys here in a couple of weeks. But for right now, I just want you to know that
I'm going to turn this audio off. I'm sorry. So I'm doing a trick.
Being in here twice. I don't know if you were hearing that echo. I'm logged in as Don Tiemann. So on your screen, it looks like Don Tiemann is hosting this event. It's actually me, Bill Murphy. And I also use my phone as a cheat. I log in as Bill Murphy on my personal account. And I do that so that I can monitor our Q&A and I can keep things running smoothly behind the scenes while our guest speaker, our presenter, is focused on leading the PowerPoint and running my computer. Now, this is a Zoom webinar, so all of you are automatically muted. You cannot chime in verbally, and we do disable the chat function. We ask that you use the Q&A to ask questions during, and everyone that attends is going to get a Survey Monkey emailed to them at the end of this webinar, and that may come out on Monday, actually, because we're kind of busy with some technical things. But we will send out a Survey Monkey to you attendees, and we ask that you put in your name and your email address and answer a couple of questions. One will simply be, what feedback do you have about this webinar and topics? What other topics would you like to see us cover in our webinar series that we hope to continue? And the other, maybe even more important, will be, what specific projects do you have that you need help with right away? That's usually involving the solution that we're presenting, which today will be Biosol, and I'll do the introduction for our speaker here in a minute. But I just wanted you to be aware that we still do those follow-ups, and then you'll get your PDH certificate from that. So again, we're covering these 8 states. We'll have some exciting news coming soon, and all of you that know us well know that we are experts in erosion control, sediment control, and stormwater and vegetated solutions. We have CPESs in all location. I am the civil engineer PE on staff. And we are not competing with professional engineers or landscape architects, because I'm not stamping and signing my own design plans. I'm simply providing design assistance to you experts, and also providing technical support to all of our sales staff. And as I click through this little presentation that is our intro, we just like to make sure we remind people that we have been active throughout this entire COVID pandemic. We're blessed to be part of an essential industry. And I can tell you that we have set some record numbers for March, April, May, and June. And our trucks, our delivery drivers, our warehouses have stayed very busy. We have practice social distancing. We've put a lot of measures into place to keep all of our staff safe and our customers safe. Our customers have adapted very well to online ordering and phone ordering, and our suppliers have done an excellent job of communicating with us, and it's been really impressive to see how our industry has responded to this crisis. Now, as the technical expert, specifications engineer, whatever we call me, my title seems to kind of bounce around depending on who we're talking to. I am just providing civil engineering support for our engineered solutions. That does bleed over into some of our sediment control and erosion control systems. But when it comes to vegetated systems, I know my limitations, so I bring in experts. So the guy that I'm going to introduce, and I'll remind you of all this stuff at the end. You'll see this slide again at the end. That'll be the simple instructions of asking you to please return that Survey Monkey so we can get your PDH certificate to you. I'm going to bounce out of this presentation on purpose. I'm going to go to this next presentation and leave this slide up as I introduced our next speaker. Our speaker today is Tom Bowman. And if that name sounds familiar from Bowman Construction Supply, it is. There's a bit of a history there that he could explain. Just know this, Tom's an expert in our industry, and he's been an expert in our industry for nearly 20 years. He's the president of Rocky Mountain Bioproducts. That is a division of Bowman Construction Supply. Tom's been involved in the erosion and sediment control, ecological restoration, and mine reclamation industries for over 19 years. He works closely with landscape architects, engineers, federal and state and local government agencies, the U.S. Forest Service, EPA, the Bureau of Land Management, mine managers, and independent consultants on their reclamation projects. He also assists in value engineering solutions for projects. That is right in his wheelhouse. We love when Tom gets involved, and he has been involved in some incredible projects that he'll talk about. I don't want to steal his thunder. He focuses his efforts on building healthy soils for natural plant growth and long-term establishment for long-lasting results. He's always willing to make site inspections to help customers or participate in turf inspections including golf courses. So with that, Tom, if you unmute yourself, I'm going to hand over some controls for you.
All right, awesome. I am unmuted.
If you click on the screen, then you are driving, buddy.
All right, I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone attending. This is awesome. I'm hoping I've cranked the air conditioner up in my office because it keeps kicking on. It's supposed to be about 90 in Denver today, and I didn't think anyone wanted to hear the AC come on. So if it does kick on, it's I have it set at 79, so hopefully it doesn't come on. I'm okay with it not being nice and warm. Anyway, so thank you guys for taking your time out of your day to listen to this and to look into vegetation management. And really, I want to introduce a couple different products to you and talk about vegetation management in general as to how is the best way to vegetate a site. What are options? I'm not going to tell you by any means this is the only way, but I think that there's a lot of value in what we're able to provide with these products. We're going to discuss about 3 products. We're talking about our Biosol Forte product, which is an organic fertilizer. We're talking about Humate and some mycorrhizae. So as we get started, we are going to, oh, if my screen moves, Bill, oh, there we go. Oops. Okay, we have a little bit of a lag, so give me a second.
You're gonna want to make sure there's nothing else open, and once you took the controls, you should be able to go back to your beginning slide and just use your arrows. You may need to turn down your sound on your computer because we're hearing it.
Oh, so I'm loud.
It's not your audio; it's just hearing your computer sound.
Okay. So
actually, why don't you turn that back up a little bit? You did quiet yourself. We don't want that. It's something we talked about yesterday, but you're going to be good. Go back up a little bit more. We want to hear you, and you should have complete control of the screen. Nobody else is.
Okay. Okay. So really, when we talk about soil, I like to kind of go back and talk about all the different types of soil there are, and you know, there's 20,000. Oh, where's my slide, Bill?
I'm still here with you. You're controlling the slide.
Okay. Okay. So here we are. So here's a photo of the soils around the U.S. There's 12 dominant types of soil classifications. With that said, there's over 70,000 different types of soil in the U.S. So you can kind of look at where each of you are located. And, you know, for us in Colorado, that soil can be dramatically different. Kansas, it's a little bit more consistent. But what we find is when we disturb soil, we're disturbing a lot of the microbial life in the soil. So soil consists of organic matter. Oh my gosh, this is sensitive. There we go. It's organic matter. Then we take our minerals, which are our macronutrients, which is what we call nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, trace minerals, and then really water. And a lot of people don't think of air and being consistent or being important in the soil surface, but rather important because you don't want to have anaerobic conditions for growing vegetation. And then lastly, really the microorganisms. And we're going to talk about some of the microorganisms that really drive the soil life and drive plant life for plants. So our Biosol product it's an organic fertilizer. It's plant-based. It's got some unique qualities to it. It is bacteria and fungal biomass. There are no animal byproducts in it whatsoever. It's a high-quality, stable, organic matter. And so the point of that is that this product is the byproduct of penicillin. It goes through a fermentation process. So as I like to explain to people, if we said we were going to bring you all lunch today into your office, and we're going to bring you some grapes and some barley and hops, I don't think anyone would be very excited about that lunch. However, I know this, if I said I'm bringing you some fermented grape juice that's been in a cask, in a barrel, and I'm bringing in some fermented barley and hops that's been fermented and it's been canned and it's been bottled by, you pick your favorite brewer, you'd be a little bit more excited about it. So when this product goes through that fermentation process, it organically binds those elements so that they're uniquely bound into a very hard, long-lasting organic nutrient source. In fact, our Biosol Forte actually the bacterial biomass out of our product gets fermented twice. So again, it's a long-lasting multi-nutrient and soil amendment, and really it's promoting soil life. As I said, our Biosol Forte is our nutrient value, and that's a 721. It's 95% fungal and bacterial biomass. It's about a 50-50 percentage there. And we know that grasses prefer to live in a 1-to-1 bacteria to fungal ratio. It's over 75% organic matter, and we're going to talk about organic matter here shortly. One of the great parts of this product is only, I show there 6.5% of it's insoluble. Only 0.5 of it's is water soluble. So it's not, you know, if we get a big massive rain, flooding, large snowstorm over it, we're not losing any nutrients to leaching whatsoever. In fact, most of our sites, we see nutrients lasting for 3 to 5 years. So we often come up with specifiers and landscape architects who look at the numbers. You know, as I said, this product was a 721 nutrient value, but our nutrients come from different places, so we can't always go by the numbers. It may not always add up, but the nutrient source of your nutrients is key, an element. So when we look at organic matter, we know, like I said, this is over 90 or over 75% organic matter. We're closer into the 80% range. We have another product that is 95% organic matter. But when we talk about organic matter, I want to take a moment here and explain 3 things. When we look at things like compost, and this is not to bash on compost, but we may start out with 100% organic material. Okay, don't confuse material and matter to be the same. Organic material is what things start out as. So our Biosol Forte starts out as 100% plant-based material. It's soybean meal, it's cottonseed meal, it's beet sugar and things like that. And so those are all plant materials. When it gets fermented and gets broken down and it comes down, you then take a measurement of it for organic matter. Organic matter is basically what provides value back into soils for soil life and for plant life. It's, you know, the beauty of organic matter is it minimizes soil compaction. Well, if we start out with 100% organic matter or material, and we end up with, let's say 80% organic matter, the obvious question is what's the rest of it? I mean, we got to equal 100%. The rest of it's what we would call organic debris, otherwise known as ash. This can have no intrinsic value or no nutritional value for soil or for plants. So our fungal biomass absorbs food from dead and organic matter. It converts hard to digest organic materials into food, and is what we see with this. And like I said, this is a beneficial fungal biomass. The good fungi outcompetes the bad fungi, therefore promoting healthy soils. In many cases, we find that we're able to fight off fungal diseases in yards. The bacterial biomass out of this feeds other soil microbes. It keeps nutrients in that rooting zone. And what's really kind of a neat aspect of bacterial biomass is many times it filters and breaks down pollutants that are in the soil. So when we do reclamation work, on whether it's a mine or pipelines, you know, we don't often worry. We worry about high amounts of pollutants, but if it's trace elements, we don't get overly concerned about that. Another one of the key elements, and there's 2 big separators in this product. Mycelium is one of them. Mycelium is a vegetative part of the fungus that supports the development of mycorrhizae. You can't look up mycelium without it referencing mycorrhizae. It's always going to reference mycorrhizae. It's a natural biomass that is naturally reoccurring in healthy soils. In fact, as you drive, if you've ever driven across like the plains or in the mountains and early in the morning, and you kind of see that spider web effect growing along the ground, that is your mycelium that's growing. So this is the base of the Biosol. When they produce penicillin for animal and human consumption, what is left is the mycelium. There's no chance of any penicillin being left in that mycelium, because what we do is we take that mycelium and we actually heat it up and cook it to granulize it. And so there's no chance of penicillin being involved in the product, in the final product. This mycelium is also the most important part and most permanent part of the fungus. It really enhances the relationship between plants and mycorrhiza. And this is where we know that relationship expands on the whole, helps build the mycorrhiza as well.
Just a time check, Tom. We're 15 minutes in.
Yep, we're all good. We're all good. So the next ingredient that's great with this, that's unique to this product, is a material called chitin. Chitin is, if you've ever eaten shellfish or peel and eat shrimp, it is, when you peel the shrimp, this is the shell of that shrimp. This is very similar to that. As you can see the photo over there on the right, it's kind of like a polymer. It's got that, it's got those cells in there which house microbes. It actually houses, it holds nutrients. This material, because of our process, is really where our nutrient source is. This is where our nitrogen really comes from. It's a very hard material, but it also really is a housing unit for microbes. And you can see that on that lower right-hand corner. It's that housing unit for microbes that really helps develop a better microbial life in the soil. And then there's carbon. So the product's about 35% carbon. Again, carbon is great. It's basically another housing unit for microbial activity. It is a basis for some soil fertility. It is a great buffer against harmful substances, just like that our bacterial biomasses is. And you can see there again, there in that upper right-hand corner, the cells, which is kind of where we get those microbes living. This also increases the cation exchange capacity of the soils. So really, our Biosol is a long-term nutrient source that's due to that chitin content. It improves and changes soil structure, building soil humus 7 times faster than natural succession does. That's a written and proven study. Stimulates microbial life, retains moisture. Again, that's due to the chitin content, that organic polymer portion of the product. And really, this is all long-lasting, again, because of that because of that fermentation process. However, I do like to express the one thing is that we don't provide a quick green up. You can't provide a quick green up and provide long-term nutrients. So if we put this in a yard, it's typically going to take 30 days before you see anything green up. When we're applying Biosol to your soil food web, if you notice here, we're not only adding organic matter affecting the plants, but we're adding the bacteria and fungi, which is your second trophic level of the soil food web, and that's in essence also affecting our third. So we're affecting 3 levels of the soil food web. We're not just feeding plants, and we're not just adding a little something to the soil. We're adding the bacteria and fungi and all that as well. This is a study that was done by UC Davis with the Federal Highway Administration and Caltrans. And their goal with this was to find out how quick do nutrients release. And part of this was a great study because they took everything as you see there on the chart. We had composted mix, we had ammonium phosphate, then we had another straight compost, poultry byproduct, then a coated slow release urea product, and then the Biosol. And so think of a sand toilet in a column, like a beaker. The goal of this was to basically flush nutrients out as quick as they could. So this is a little skewed. There's no doubt about that. But it is interesting that you see ammonium phosphate here between 2,500 and 3,000 had already released nutrients. It was already releasing nutrients before the bag was opened. You know, ammonium phosphate, I like to think of it as pelletized gas. If we look at the triangle up here, that's the poultry byproduct. Again, that's whether it's turkey manure or chicken manure or something like that. that is releasing very quickly. And with it, after 4 flushings, and I should say after 5 flushings, it was basically your nutrients were leveling out. So from that standpoint, quick flush of nutrients and then gone. The Biosols is what they found lasting the longest. And they really, when they stretched this out, they decided that this mimics what native plants actually want. Again, my point in some of this is do not equate nutrient value to nutrient release rates. I know there's people saying, hey, we want a low nitrogen. Well, low nitrogen can still easily release very quickly. So here's a trial that was done in Missouri, and we're going to get into a lot of before and after photos. There's not a lot of verbiage after this, so there'll be a lot of pretties and good-looking photos after this. So this is, again, Missouri DOT test plot. Interesting part, this manure test plot also had some mycorrhizae in it. But what they found, or what one of our consultants found when he looked at this, is that all the seed species that were seeded were shown in our plot, where this other plot had mycorrhizae added to it. We believe it was a single species mycorrhizae. They just said there was mycorrhizae on that site, but you can see the noticeable difference. This is a creek restoration project up in north central Montana. Soil pH on this was 1.4 when they started. So they amended this with various amounts of lime and some compost. This was a heavy rate for us. Our rate went down on this site at 3,000 pounds to the acre. It also went down 6 months prior to them throwing seed. This is a creek realignment project up in outside of Helena, Montana. Again, this was a drill seeded site with just simply Biosol with Pioneer Technical Services did that project. Again, this is Superflood site again up at Block P. Here's a photo at 10 years after the fact. This was simply a tailings cap. And if you look at this, what's unique and interesting is if you look at the bottom right-hand portion of this right photo, it's basically just gravel. Another stream channel restoration 3 years after the fact. Here the soil pH was there. Here's a pipeline. Sorry, there was a pipeline project. And then fun project here. This is Guernsey National Guard Airport, or Army National Guard Airport up in Guernsey, Wyoming. They were getting the jets that were sucking in rocks and things out of this. So that's actually a turf reinforcement mat that was applied and stapled, anchored in. And then we were used underneath that with seed and Biosol, and we actually had some mycorrhizae on that side as well. And then one of our fun projects, this was done up in Elk City, Idaho. This is a project that the contractor of ours called us on and said, hey, he goes, I got this slide area. We're going to be, I get those involved to call you. We're going to have a conference call. And again, we applied this at a heavy rate. Time was of the essence. We applied this at 3,000 pounds of Biosol, 1,000 pounds of Humate, and then mycorrhizae as well. And that's it when it started. That was it after its first year on there on the right. Year 2 that's last year, and then that was a close-up from last year as well. So you can really see we basically got some things almost growing out of rocks here. What's not growing is basically a rock face, hence why it slid. But funny comment is the contractor had actually said, all the federal agencies said, well, this was going to be a failure. And the contractor basically and simply said to him, why don't we let it be a failure after we apply material and then you tell me it's a failure? They've now adopted some of our practices up there a little bit more receptive to this. And then here's a slope revegetation project. This was actually like a Presto, a geocell, a living wall application where it was shot directly into a wall, and the terraces there. But that's 4 years after the fact as well. And then one of our most recent projects was, we've been doing stuff at the car fire restoration project. This is kind of interesting. People had the option to treat or not treat, whether it was hydraulic or straw mulch. And they found that straw mulching, they had 91%, it was effective, followed by the hydraulic treatments were 74% effective, while the untreated plots showed the least amount of vegetation at 33%. And needless to say, the amounts of soil that was collected off the untreated site was dramatic compared to the untreated, or compared to the treated site. So we do handle a lot of fire restoration as well. Here's a coal seam fire up in Colorado, 2 years after the fact. And after 1 year, they had 70% of their seeds germinated. So they were extremely happy with that. And then Clyde Warren Park in Dallas, we do flower beds as well. So really, if you're seeding anything, planting anything, old rehab disease turf, this site has been had a full set of disease on the side of it. This contractor did was go back in with Biosol Humate and Mycorrhizae and seed, and hit it very heavily, but that was it after the fact. So really, we look at this, and communication is important to us. You know, whether it's a soil sample or whether it is getting more information on what is going on, where we can help value engineer. This was a site down in Castle Rock, Colorado, and long story short, we have a whole case study presented on this project, but we ended up saving the contractor, or I should say the landowner, about $79,000 on 6 roadside detention ponds, wetlands, and roadside shoulders. And the city and county had proposed a project of ripping all this stuff out and starting over. And our thought to that was, let's go back in and redo what has been done and topically apply materials and reblanket the areas that needed to be retreated or reprotected, I should say. So great results on that. And again, we love to value engineer. So again, we look at raw materials to fermented products, and really it's dramatically different than whether it's a chemical product or a manure-driven product. And you know, I always go back to the wine and the beer theory of the fermentation process. With that said, it's going to roll us into our Humate discussion. And I laugh because I have a lot of friends that are golf course superintendents, and they all use Humate. And every one of them, when I ask them, I say, hey, what do you see out of it? They said, you know, we just see better results. I said, well, what's it really doing? And they all say they don't really exactly know. So I kind of chuckle with them about that. That's why I say it's a little hard to explain this stuff. However, our humates are coming from a freshwater source out of New Mexico. Humates are basically a biodegraded, fermented, and compressed remains of fossilized plant material and animal material. It's high in organic matter. It's high in humic acids and typically in fulvic acids as well. Those are related. What you will always see in humic acids is you'll see two things. You'll see liquid humic acids, or you'll see granular. I will remind you that anything that goes into liquid form, whether it starts off as liquid or it dissolves into liquid, you will get, and that's a misprint, it's 30 to 45 days is the maximum you would typically get out of any liquid product. We have liquids, and we'll talk about one here shortly, but a granular humic acid is going to last for over 145 days. That humic acid is going to look very similar to that granular there on the bottom center of your photo. It's works directly with your cation exchange capacity in the soils, which is going to hold water and hold nutrients in the rooting zone. Now, this is kind of a typical analysis of what we see in our humic acids. I will mind you, though, that when you work with humic acids, you'll find a wide variety and variability in different products, largely because, remember, it's mined, it's been compressed materials over centuries and centuries and thousands of years. But more importantly, it's also really about the processing of these materials. You'll find very inexpensive humic acids on the market. However, we've partnered with a group that's provides very stable and consistent product, and it's all due to the processing. So what's in humic acid? So there's this humate, as we call it, has got humic acid, it's got fulvic acid. Both of these are used in plant cell and root cell development of plants. They can be taken up as a foliar if they were sprayed onto leaf tissue, but they're also great as a soil drench or a soil nutrient for your roots once things start germinating. The other one that people don't really know about it that's in there is called humin, H-U-M-I-N, not A-N. But humin is actually like a non-soluble high molecular weight polymer. It's basically Earth's way of retaining moisture. It's the way that Mother Earth, holds that moisture for plants and soil life. And so that's an area. This is a product we see quite a bit in the turf industry as well. And one of the nice things about this is, if you've ever heard of someone talking about, oh, we have a liquid airifier yard, that's what they're doing with this. So how do they work? If we think about going back to our childhood days and playing with magnets in a classroom, and you would get the magnets that would attract each other, and then you'd get the two that would repel each other. If you put two positives together, two negatives together, how they would repel. This is what happens with humate. Humate is actually adding that negative charge into the soil. That negative charge is going to hold on to water and nitrogen. However, clay is a negative charge as well. So this is going to help open up those soil partlets in a clay-based soil. So when we're trying to revegetate in clay soils, because I never get healthy soils or good soils to reclaim, it's always, I typically see, we have clay or we have sand. In those cases, this is where we add a little bit heavier dose of humate, because it's going to help break open those clay particles in the soil so that water, roots can develop to be deeper and be more effective for the plant life. And also in that time, it's also going to help agglomerate some of the soil particles together to make larger soil particles, so that that's a regular soil structure consistency. And then again, lastly, that humate creates a general acid that helps leach out bound up nutrients. C-mate is a water-soluble powder that we have. That is it is all based off of the humic acids, and there is they take sea kelp with this as well. This is a very highly concentrated water-soluble powder, and in many cases acts as a starter fertilizer. Again, this enhances root cell and plant cell development. You'll see some things on there, gibberellins and auxins. I'm not wanting to flood anyone with big words. I'm trying to keep this to be a kind of a 101 knowledge of humates and biosol and mycorrhizae. So there's more to this, but it simply makes the fertilizers which it is used more effective. If you have a spray equipment, whether it's a hydroseeder or spray tanks, a phenomenal product, because it's very inexpensive. It's going to stimulate that root cell development. It's, again, though, mind you, this is nutrients are only going to last for 30 to 45 days once it's supplied. However, it's a lot easier to ship a water-soluble powder. This powder is going to look like black flour. But you see our application rate. 1 ounce mixed with 100 gallons of water covers 4,000 square feet of turf. We've also used this in reclamation We do that when we have a cover crop. As I had mentioned with the Biosol Forte, there's no fast green up with it. This is what we would apply to help benefit that fast green up if you're using it on turf, or if we're handling a seed specification that's got maybe a cover crop in it, something that's going to germinate in the first 10 days is where we like to use this. But it's also a great standalone product. So what do humates do? Again, they increase the water holding capacity of soil. That's that human content I mentioned. Breaks up those unproductive clay soils. So you can see here kind of the theme of building soil. This is really what our focus is. It's going to help retain water-soluble inorganic fertilizers, then release them as needed to plants. You have to hope that water-soluble inorganic fertilizer is going to be around long enough. Sometimes the big flood can wipe that out pretty quickly. Most importantly, stimulates seed germination and then enhances the uptake of fertilizers and minerals by plants. So that's going to lead us into our last topic of mycorrhizal fungi. Mycorrhizal fungi is, I like to think of it, explain it this way. If we think of our head, if I think of our bodies as a plant, and you think of your arms and legs as your roots, and the only thing that's above ground is our head. Our arms and our legs are our roots. Think about the hairs on your arms and legs. So those are able to dive into smaller soil particles in the soil to retrieve nutrients, to retrieve water, to gather some air for the plants. So mycos is the word for fungus, rhizis is the word for roots. So it's a root fungus, or a fungus root, as we should say. But it's a beneficial relationship between specialized soil fungi and the roots of plants. So really, this is not, we aren't making mycorrhizae. Mycorrhizae is grown. They're naturally occurring in healthy soil systems. They extend the root zone anywhere from 100 to 1,000 times larger below the surface of the ground. And in return, it's so the mycorrhiza is taking the sugars that the plant's producing, and in exchange, it's providing the plant with nutrients, whether it's water or mycorrhiza or nitrogen or phosphorus. So it's truly that below ground connection. As I said, they're much smaller than the root hairs. So there you can, this photo, you can really see the orange taproot, and then you can kind of see the white roots coming off of it. But all that light white is your mycorrhizal hyphae, which is next to it. Now, what's it look like up close? I'm sorry, let me back up. What does it do? Again, it releases powerful enzymes into the soil that unlock hard to capture nutrients. So we see when we get soil samples, and we ideally love to see soil samples, what we do is we take what's available, but so many times plants aren't even able to get to what's available because the mycorrhizas, plants haven't established their mycorrhizal connection yet to get into the soils. So the mycorrhiza releases these powerful enzymes into the soil to unlock those hard to capture nutrients. It builds a natural microbial system. In many cases, we'll see them cross-pollinate with other plants in the area. They help drought tolerance. They help environmental extremes, environmental stress. They reduce the use of fertilizers as well. But most importantly, it increases plant quality and plant health. So what's it look like up close? This is it. So think of this as being your finger. Well, you see the hyphae coming off the sides, and if you look at these end ones, you can kind of see it looks like a garden hose. They are open-ended, and they will. That's where they transport nutrients and water back and forth for the plant. So it's actually, it's nature's way of supplying nutrients for their plants, and why you can see in so many areas where nutrient cycling can happen. Again, this is a small pine seedling. But as we look down here on the right sections, you see big clumps of that white hyphae growing in areas. Well, what was really neat about this is that the reason you see those clumps of it right there in some of these areas is it was attacking some of the pine needles that were in this soil mix and trying to harvest out nutrients out of there. So it was retrieving those nutrients for the plant life, even though those nutrients were deep down in the soils. So we like to talk about, there's lots of different types of mycorrhizae out there. There's a single species mycorrhizae, and we prefer to see a multiple species mycorrhizae. Again, there's thousands of species of mycorrhizae. But what's unique is our guys have taken really the four most effective at, like the most effective at water retrieval, the most effective at nutrient retrieval, the most effective at helping protect against disease and soil pathogens, and then also the environmental stresses, i.e. the heat stress of these plants. So by putting in a multi-species mycorrhiza, we're going to affect more, we're going to provide a better soil life for these plants. It's also, we would never, or I shouldn't say never, I've seen it happen, but rarely do we ever see a specifier or an architect select one species, one type of seed to go into a project. I've seen it one time, it was in California. They insisted on having only California poppies on the site. So we actually sent them a single species mycorrhiza just for California poppies. Now, 95% of the world's plants have a mycorrhizal life, have a mycorrhizal relationship. What happens is when we disturb soils and we have erosion, or we have fallow, or we've got dormant soils, we lose our mycorrhizal life. So disturbing the top 3 inches of soil, we lose 55% of our mycorrhizal life in soils. If we disturb 9 inches or more, we've destroyed 97% of the mycorrhizal life in the soil. So I don't have it in this presentation, but I've got photos of mounds, and I mean 30 to 40 feet tall mounds of dirt where people saying, contractors saying, oh, see, we stockpiled our topsoil. That's great, but that's like putting all those microbes in the middle of that into jail. There's nothing for them to live on. So it's important that if we disturb that much soil, we add some mycorrhizal life back, some mycorrhiza back into that soil mix, or into our seed mix, or back into our amendments to re-inoculate that soil for plant life. So here's a root mass colonized with mycorrhiza. You see there on the right, all the white hyphae there on the sides. This is a turf plot, interesting plot here. They basically had, you have a control, you've got mycorrhiza alone, you have fertilizer and mycorrhiza, and you can see the little bare spot on the fertilizer plot there on the left. That was a chemical fertilizer. It's the only plot in there that showed any disease, and it was from fertilizer alone. But really, mycorrhiza loves that organic fertilizer. So I'm going to end and kind of wrap up with this. So we had a reclamation project back in 2004, and I know it's old. I've got a couple others of these, but this is really just so well stated by the guy who did this project. He called me and said, hey, we've got a site. This is what it looked like in May 2004, 7 months after sowing it. This is up in Oregon, Central Oregon. He said, this is what it looks like in May of 2004. So the site was 55% bare soil. I find that hard to believe, but he was the expert, so I'll buy that was 55% bare soil. And he continued to monitor it. And as he called me, as he was going out to the site, he was rather nervous. He said, Tom, I got problems with this. Now, this is a guy who'd written the revegetation book for the U.S. Forest Service and for the Federal Highway Administration on reclamation or revegetation. We've done a lot of projects together, and again, this is all native grasses. He called me as he was on his way there, and he called me shortly after he had arrived and said, "Tom, I got tears in my eyes. This is what my site looks like." Now, this is a year and a half, almost 2 years later. It was one treatment of Biosol, Humate, and Mycorrhizae on the site. And many of you may have seen this. Some of these photos have been used in some revegetation books. But he said he just could not believe how well this all looked after his fear of showing up from the previous year. So really, as he said to me, his lesson learned on arid sites especially, it can take several years for native plants to fully germinate and express themselves. So it's important that we give some of these plants time to do this. This was the first project that same guy did. He called me on this project and he says, "Look, it's too steep of a slope. This is only half the project." He said he can't keep nutrients on the site or on the slope, much less seed. So we'd use our Biosol on this site, 20 pounds of mycorrhizae and a high-end tackifier. On the opposite side of that road is a Gabion wall. And this was it after the first year. And year 2, this is what it looked like. So to get things to grow, we can do it. But we all have to know one thing, we need to have some patience and take some time to do that. So when I talk to a lot of people, or I have people ask me, who's using these products? Well, Departments of Transportation, National Park Service, there's a long list there for you. I don't need to read to any one of you guys. I'm not here to really insult anyone's intelligence or ability to read. But if you're ever doing revegetation, I tell you that there's a lot of ways to look at these things, and the right products in the right place is important. Like Bill mentioned, we like to talk about value engineering. We don't wrap these products all up in one bag at this time, largely because we can take soil samples and customize this for a customer site. We value engineer it. We find sites that may not need much humate because it may be a sandy, a good sand loam. We may have sites that have heavy and clay where we're going to end up using more. So
can I jump in with you here?
Absolutely.
So this is perfect timing. That what Tom and I talked about in preparing for today's webinar is this is not a totally all-inclusive everything you'd ever learn about Biosol or revegetation. This is a 101, as Tom said. The only way that these are successful for you is if you ask questions, and we have about 9 Q&A questions. Don't look them up, Tom, because we're going to answer them in writing when we send out the follow-ups to everyone.
Okay.
I've got a few of them that I picked, but I'll let you go through your slides, but I want to make sure everybody on here knows that we need to talk with you specifically about your project in your site, in your region, because there is not one size fits all. We've been asked that, is there just one mix that we recommend for everywhere? Oh, heavens no. Tom's been on wildfire restorations in California. He's gotten vegetation to grow on the side of a rocky mountain in Colorado. He's helped people around the country, and even he's been involved in aware projects around the world. Tom has said value engineering, it can only happen if we get the information from you. One of those would be a soil sample. You mentioned soil sampling, Tom. What do you look for in a soil analysis? Or do you want to go through a couple more slides before you get to that? We're at 1:18 and we're going to close at 1:30 sharp.
Yep. No, and I got my eye on the clock. I have one eye on the clock and one eye on the screen. So
what do you think about
I will address
soil sample analysis. I'll just leave that for you, and I'll let you keep rolling.
Okay. Thank you, Bill, for that. Yeah, really soil sampling is, as I explained to a lot of people, I said, well, and it's not it doesn't drive the point home today like it used to, not with this pandemic. But as I always told people, I said, you would never call the doctor on the phone and say, hey, I got this rash and I got a fever and my eyes look like, my eyes are droopy. What should I take? Well, I will tell you, because my kid thought he had COVID. He called the doctor. They said, we don't want to see him, just treat him like he had COVID. So he did treat him over the phone. However, 9 times out of 10, if you're saying I got a rash, they want to see it. So we wouldn't treat soils the same way. Why would we have bonds and have big money spent out for, and potentially have our projects leaned on against for not having vegetation. Why wouldn't we take a soil sample that's can cost $30 to $50 to know how to treat that soil to give it the best chance to live? So we will do soil samples. You can always send a soil sample to us or to any of our offices. We will take those soil samples, we'll get them analyzed for you, and we will get you a recommendation back. Typically, depending upon the location, it takes 1 to 2 weeks.
Is there a fancy high-tech way for them to gather the soil sample, or how do they do it?
That's a great question. It's simply, you give me a baggy size of material out of the top 4 to 5 inches of what you're going to be planting in. It's going to save you guys time. It's going to potentially saves you hundreds of dollars. But that's the best way. In some cases, we just did a site up in the mountains. I took 2 samples over a 1 acre period. I'm expecting them to be pretty similar. We will typically give you 1 application rate for the site, unless it's a massive site. So as we like to say, your dirt, your soil, your problem. It's not my client at the time, but our biosolution is there for your peace of mind. So we can do a lot of different solutions for you. And I'm going to give you, this is what happens when you have poor soil prep. Hopefully give you all a little bit of a laugh before the end of the presentation.
One that can laugh out loud, so.
Exactly, there you go. Anyway, so we really like to talk about the art of building dirt into productive soils. So, we say your dirty problem is our biosolution. There's my contact information on there. I will tell you that wefixdirt.com website's got research, case studies, distributor information. It's got anything if it's not on there, again, please feel free to reach out to me or any one of our offices. I work quite closely, obviously, with all the ASP and quick supply offices in the Midwest there, and I'm more than happy to help answer questions. Any other questions that you had there, Bill?
Yeah, I do, and thank you for that, Tom. Good job on your presentation, and great job on keeping it on time. We do have a few minutes left. So
on time, I got another half hour to go, don't
I? So just a reminder to everybody that when you do follow up with us, let us know if you're interested, or use Tom's contact information or mine or Don's or any of your local Bowman Construction Supply, Quick Supply Company, or ASP Enterprises reps. And some of those guys are actually on this webinar because our people continue to seek knowledge. Even if we've heard a presentation before, we like to keep learning. And we are continuing to evolve our solutions. And it's been interesting, as Tom mentioned, COVID and how things had to change in the medical world with actually some people doing some remote doctor visits. What's interesting is that even with our industry, we've really grown to, we love the handshakes. We love the hugs and the personal meetings with lunch and learns, but we've grown to realize that's just not a reality for a lot of people right now. And what we're going to do is just continue to offer lounge and learns, or however you want to refer to it. We've even sometimes sent lunch to somebody's office, but if a lot of you are still working from home and not at your office, you're going to just eat at home. But we're going to be able to do these Zoom meetings instead of Zoom webinars, where we could have experts like Tom on the call with you, and you and your coworkers or your peers or your contractor, whoever's involved in your project can be on the call, and we can just have an interactive meeting, just like you are with other people in your business. We're available to do that for free, and there's no obligation for us to value engineer your project. And that's the only way you're going to dig deeper. And I love that pun for Tom's presentation. The only way you're going to dig deeper is if you take this to the next level. So of all the questions that were asked, they will all be answered in writing if we can't answer them all verbally on the phone right now. But I'm going to go ahead and tee one up for you, Tom. And that is, how do I know what type of mycorrhiza I need to use? You've talked about mycorrhiza. We are never going to understand it to your ability, but how do I know which one I need to use?
Well, so I kind of touched on that briefly. So there are 2 types of mycorrhiza. There's 2 categories of mycorrhiza, I should say. There's an endomycorrhiza and an ectomycorrhiza. Ectomycorrhiza is really designed or is utilized by conifer trees, so your evergreens, your pines, and our endo is typically used for grasses, and then also for a lot of your other trees, maples, birches. There are a few trees that use both. We actually provide, and we're in the process of providing what we call a planter's kit. We do have it available now in a bucket. We're trying to get it bagged, but it's a Biosol Humate and Mycorrhizae mix. And in that mix, we use because we don't know what that person's going to use it for. So we use an all-purpose, an endo and ecto species of mycorrhizae in that bag or in that bucket at this time. That way it's kind of dummy proof, if you will. It's goof proof, whatever you want to call it. But it's going to be most effective that way. There's, like I said, there's thousands of species of mycorrhizae, but our suppliers are taking the most common 4 that are the most efficient at what they do. We can get it customized. It can be a little bit more expensive, but it's a cheap form of insurance. Next question, Bill.
Yeah, so the next one is, if somebody's doing this in their residential yard, should they use a drop spreader, a broadcast spreader, or do they have to spray it somehow? That's
a great question too. I've never liked drop spreaders because they seem to streak. They're great for seeding. A broadcast spreader. So both these materials, well, the Biosol and the Humate are, think of like a big dark brown, maybe black piece of sand, about 2 millimeters, simply in a broadcaster. And the beauty of all these products is you can't burn with it. So we all know that you send your kid out to fertilize your yard and you're going to have to watch them like a hawk because they're trying to, watch a YouTube video while they're filling up the spreader. If it spills on their site, it's going to grow heavier in that site. I don't want to be a sales guy and tell you the more you use, the better. There is some truth to that. But again, that's why we like to try to value engineer. But they get a typical broadcast spreader. All these materials can go through a hydroseeder as well. A drop spreader is typically a little bit harder because they're really meant for seed. And in a broadcaster, we typically we ask our clients to know their acreage or their square footage, open up their spreader, and then have their elements measured, and then just spread until it's gone.
You mentioned that Biosol is a long-term solution, so it doesn't have that immediate green up. If somebody has a customer, and I'm going to take over the screen here, somebody has a customer that's looking for an immediate green up, how do they satisfy both? How do they provide immediate green up, but yet have this long-term plan with Biosol?
So great question. So that's one of the reasons I touch on that CMate product. If someone's got the ability to spray, that CMate spray, which has got a little bit of trace or got nutrients in there, that's 6-8-12, that's a fast-acting nutrient source. It's concentrated, so you're not losing any of that into the atmosphere before it's spread. You could use I've had people use chemical fertilizers, and I've had people use a manure-based fertilizer to start at a very light rate, just as for that initial growth spurt. Now, mind you, one of the things that I always get with architects and engineers is they say, hey, you know what? We get a lot of weeds. We're worried about weeds. We don't like to fertilize because we know we're gonna get weeds. Well, weeds get blown in. Come on, in yards, you can treat your whole yard, but every year you get weeds. Weeds will get blown in. All these elements, the Biosol Humate and Mycorrhizae, are all slow releasing. So weeds want a quick flush of nitrogen. Mycorrhizae doesn't have any association with weeds whatsoever. So weeds aren't going to get any boost out of mycorrhizae. The Biosol is a slow release nutrient form. Now, what we do find sometimes is that Biosol and Humate is going to help unlock some of these soils, especially in homeowners, where they've used chemicals over many, many years. They will start locking up soil nutrients. Well, when you start using a good organic like Biosol and Humate, you may get a flush of nitrogen coming out. And that's where you may end up seeing some weeds. I tell people to spot spray those.
Thank you for addressing that. We're at 129.5. We've got a good track record of getting done at 1:30 Central. I'm going to tease everybody with a question that they're going to have to pay attention to the emails that come out. And that is, how do these products compare to biotic soil amendments? And we don't have time for Tom to answer it live, but we'll ask him to answer it in writing, because biotic soil amendments are definitely part of our business. And it's an excellent question. And so again, I'm Bill Murphy, the civil engineer for Bowman Construction Supply, ASB Enterprises, and Quick Supply Company. Thank you for joining us. Stay tuned for emails from Don Tiemann and myself with wrap-ups and survey monkeys. And we're going to get the PDH certificates out to you along with written answers to all your questions. It's now 1:30. Tom, thank you for joining us. Great job, buddy.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, with that, we'll say goodbye and sign off. And y'all be safe. Thank you.